In this week's Top Gear, racing for the super rich. Bring your own Lamborghini. The car that refused to die, the return of the Lea-Francis. And if you can't afford a real supercar, you can always get a pretend one. Think big truck, and this is the image that springs most readily to mind.
And you don't get out and remonstrate with the guy because, well, he's got tattoos on his eyeballs. Just yesterday, after fighting a rhino and disarming an angry teenager on the Uzbekistan border, he ate his toolkit.
Of course, if they're not up your jacksie, you're up theirs, cursing the beaching report and swearing you'll vote for anyone who gets them off the road.
Well, my pad is very messy, and there's whiskers on my kid, and I'm more hung up with music, and I always fade away. I ain't got no time for loving, because my time is all used up. Just for sitting around creating all that groovy kind of stuff.
But tonight, I want to let you peek into the world of the truck driver, a world that might surprise you. First of all, he paid £1,000 for an HGV licence and training. Then he set himself up as a one-man band owner-operator and bought a lorry. This Renault has a list price of £160,000. Road tax for an Arctic is about £3,000 a year. Your annual fuel bill is £24,000. Government safety checks cost another £45 every 6 weeks. And insurance is another £3,000. Now, guess what you get paid for hauling a container from Felixstowe to Leeds? 70p a mile. Or what if you take a bunch of computers from Cardiff to southern Italy? You're gone for 5 days, you cover 4,000 miles, and you pocket, if you're lucky, £2.5 grand.
One puncture and the profit from the whole trip is gone. This is why you tend not to find lorry drivers parked up at the side of the autoroute every afternoon, thumbing through their Michelin guides, trying to find somewhere to stay that night. L'Espérance in Vézelay here, 3 rosettes, round about 170 quid for the night, 90 quid for dinner. Doesn't happen. When they stop for the night, they sleep in the cab. In here, there's a penthouse view and 4 rosette living. Look at this. Sounds, wardrobe here for your DJ, tons of cubby space at the back. There's a bunk behind the seats and another one up here. Now, don't worry, you don't have to climb up there. Look, they give you a nice little ladder. And once you're in bed under your Noddy Goes to Toy Town duvet cover, look what you've got here. Controls for the electric sunshine roof, and you've got central locking to keep the French out. You've got your interior light switch and this, which is an alarm clock, and something which turns the heater on as and when you need it in the night. They're all wusses, these guys. Underneath this, well, this embroidery table here, there's space for a microwave oven, so you can eat in. That saves money, because saving money is what this game's all about.
What's the cheapest deal? Which truck does the most miles to the gallon? What about service intervals? These are the things that matter in Lorryland. Except they don't. Unbelievably, what matters most of all is image. Truckdom is split into 2 camps, those who have a Scania and those who want one. With its Bertoni styling, this is to trucks what Ray-Ban is to sunglasses. But hold on a minute, you're thinking Scania, that's the same as Saab. Quite cool, but surely a Mercedes-Benz is better.
Like a rock, standing arrow straight, like a rock, charging from the gate, like a rock, carrying the weight, like a rock.
This is the Actros, which has just been voted European Track of the Year. The judges liked its new electronic brakes. They raved about its Porsche Tiptronic-style gear change. They waxed lyrical about its low dash, which affords good all-round visibility. They liked the big mirrors, They liked the airbags too. And they were impressed with how it only needs a day's servicing every 75,000 miles. But you know what the truckers are saying? These people who put iron filings in their tea when they've run out of sugar? They're saying the Mercedes is not all that good, because its dash is a bit plasticky. Despite its flat floor, they're not that fond of the Renault either. Basically, they all want a Scania because it's the truck to have.
Me, though? Well, I've decided to go for a drive in this, the not inconsiderable Volvo Globetrotter XL. I'm not the slightest bit nervous, because about 200 years ago, my dad used to have a Volvo 260 estate car, and everyone called it a truck. I should therefore be fully familiar with this. It's moving! It's moving! There we are, 1500 RPM, time to go for 1.5. And there we are, 1500 RPM again, time to go for second. And there we are, time for another gear change, 2.5. And there we are, 1500 RPM, time to go for third. And at this point, some dizzy old bat in a Datsun pulls out in front of me. Remember, this has got 12 gears. So if I'm in 12th, she pulls out, I have to stop and then go through all that all over again. And it's, when you're accelerating, the engine in this is using a gallon of fuel every 2 miles. That's your profit margin gone, obliterated, wiped out. You've been all the way to southern Italy and back, and because some selfish car driver has pulled out, poof, gone. You've done it for nothing. I hate car drivers. I hate them.
I know a 16-litre, 520 horsepower engine sounds like fun. And I know trucks are cosy these days, but I reckon long-distance lorry driving is harder than being a brain surgeon. The pay's lousy, the French are always moaning about something, and Friends of the Earth is a constant mosquito under your dashboard. Gentlemen, I salute you.
We're all very envious of people with super fast supercars. But the trouble is, if you've got one, it's so conspicuous you can't drive it quickly. And if you see one parked up at a racetrack, it's more likely to be owned by the team sponsor rather than the driver. Except when the team sponsor is also its driver. Lamborghini Racing made its debut last year, and the series visited Brands Hatch in September. Each car is part driven at least by an amateur. It's one-make racing for the super rich that was originated 5 years ago with a series for Venturi's. And Philippe Chariol was easily hooked.
One day, a friend of mine came to me and said, I don't have enough money to buy a car. Do you want to chip in? I was in good mood. I said, yes. I give him a check. Then he said, okay, you have to come and drive with me because you're half order. And I started. I was Venturi. And the next year, I started right away to sponsor the race. And 3 years after, I'm here with the Lamborghini, the Philippe Chariol Super Sport Trophy, sponsoring the whole race.
The entry is split into two categories, as series promoter Stéphane Rattel explained.
You did one pro and one amateur together in the car, or semi-professional, which are these gentlemen drivers which are spending every weekend on the track. And that made two categories, gentlemen drivers and pro-am, and it's going quite well.
But expensive cars can create expensive repair bills.
In the first races, we have been quite mean to each other. And it did cost me, I cost that in Clio, you know, the French car. Cost about 50,000 pounds or 5,000 pounds, yeah. So every time I had an accident, I call, oh, 1 Clio, 2 Clio. So we had a few Clio to pay in the beginning, but today it's okay. I think people are taking care of their cars and be more respectful, yeah.
26 cars were brought to Brands by the promoters, who prepare all of them as part of a £35,000 a year package deal. Fortunately, they also brought a spare so I could join in the fun. The 540 horsepower supercar is quite a handful, but that V12 right behind you simply sounds glorious. My practice effort secured me a slot on the outside of row 4, with the front row filled by French Grand Prix refugees Jean-Marc Gounon and Olivier Griard. The race would last 50 minutes from a rolling start. I opted for the outside line at Paddock. And up to Druids, already challenging for 4th spot. I had a look down the inside and outside at Hawthorns and got blocked. So I took a deep breath and went down the outside into Westfield and made it through to 4th. Out front, Gounon led with Griard glued to his tail as the 2 series regulars fought to give their amateur partners the lead at the changeover. I briefly challenged for 3rd, but then fell back into the clutches of the leading gentleman driver, Ferdinand de Lesseps, who was about to prove he was no gentleman. OK then, you have the track and I'll have the grass. 4th had quickly become 6th. Just over half distance and the driver changes a due. Gounon tries to sell Griard a dummy, but only gets himself in a tangle. I've also been classified as a professional, so I'm in to hand over to amateur Ferrari 355 racer Ian Khan. And I'm not complaining, because 30 minutes of heavy Lambo steering have left my arms hanging off. Over to you, Ian.
That's quite hard work, actually. It's quite heavy. I was really enjoying a really good start, got the 4th, and then some amateur gentleman used a very professional foul trick on me after I had made a sore mistake, and he got up the inside of me and just left me with no room to go. I think the man whose great-great-great-grandfather digs canals was trying to get me to dig a trench on the outside of the corner in order to survive. After that, I made another couple of mistakes. It's hectic stuff. Come on, Ian.
Out on the track, Ian was passing everything he could, never sure if he was making up places or simply lapping the slower gentleman. My mate de Lesseps had stayed on board for the compulsory 1-minute stop, and now he was taking 2nd place off Gounon's amateur Jean-Louis Laribière. But there was no way he was going to catch Griard's partner, Thomas Bichère, who by now was heading for a comfortable victory. For a man who also owns and races a McLaren F1 supercar and was the '95 Global GT champion, it was almost business as usual. Ian brought our car home a respectable 7th, and while he'd been out on the track, I'd been doing a bit of background research.
We got 7th in the end.
Oh, that's not so bad then.
And I've just found out, did you find that hard work?
It was hard work, actually.
All the other cars
I've got power steering.
have got power steering.
I might have known.
This is the spare car.
Yeah. It's a setup job, isn't it?
Well, it was certainly good fun, but whether it's actually a gentleman's formula, I'm not so sure after the way I was treated.
Great Britain used to be a byword for quality car engineering. At the turn of the century, we could boast over 40 car makers. Long-forgotten marques like Wanderer, Albion and Straker. Today, you can count the number of British car manufacturers on the fingers of one hand. Very few have survived right through from those early days. Familiar names like Rolls-Royce, but some are less well known. You probably thought they were dead. But Lea-Francis lives on. They began in 1895 when ambitious young inventor Mr. Lee went into partnership with successful engineer Mr. Francis. From high-quality bicycles, they moved on to the production of motorcycles, and later, with a reputation for excellence, built some of the most stylish cars of the 20s, like this Hyper.
Well, this really is the epitome of vintage motoring. Lovely lines, a rakish windscreen, fabric-covered body and a beautiful leather interior. And this car was no sluggard either. Very much the fashion in those days to buy in your engines. In this case, it came from the famous Meadows company, and by the time they'd supercharged it, this device would do 85 miles an hour and was a very successful racing car at the time. Leafs, as they became known, were rugged and reliable cars, but they were high quality, expensive to build and to maintain. And in the economic depression of the 30s, buyers were few and far between. So the company almost inevitably went belly up.
But boom and bust was to be the nature of this extraordinary company, and in 1937 Lea-Francis found a saviour, Hugh Rose. Rose had previously worked for Riley and used his experience to develop an engine which was to power a whole new generation of saloon and estate cars with bizarre names like Yapton and Westland. Things went well initially. The Coventry works even survived the Blitz. But Leafs were still expensive and handmade, and there was a constant question mark over their ability to compete as the rest of the industry modernised its production and cut its costs in the post-war years.
With 100 brake horsepower under the bonnet, the 2.5-litre Tourer was supposed to relaunch Lea-Francis after the Second World War. But despite the rugged good looks and some success in British rallying, things didn't go according to plan. Over at rivals Jaguar, Sir William Lyons launched the immortal XK120, and the rock and roll generation took to that in preference to the Lea-Francis. Sales fell away, and the company eventually went bankrupt for the second time in 1962.
And that's where the story should have ended. But remarkably, in 1977, the remains of the company were sold lock, stock and barrel to a lifelong Lea-Francis fan determined to keep the magic alive.
My parents got married in May 1928, and Mother had a comparatively affluent aunt who bought a new Lea-Francis car, and she lent it to my parents for their honeymoon. Dad must have been so impressed with this car, or with the ambience of the honeymoon, I don't know, but 10 years later, when we needed a larger car, he hunted about until he found a Lea-Francis.
And that was the start of it?
That was the start. In my opinion, the most elegant period of motor car body design was the 30s, the Art Deco period, if you like. And so about 20 years ago, together with a colleague, we decided we'd design and build a new car on traditional lines, but modernised wherever possible and using modern technology, but in the Lea-Francis tradition. Of course, we can no longer build engines. Lea-Francis used to build their own engine. We had to apply to Jaguar and obtain from them a complete engine and gearbox power unit, one might say, but it is our chassis frame and our suspension, and all the small detail work and fittings, even down to the door locks and handles, are of our own manufacture.
It must be incredibly expensive to make those sort of things yourselves.
Oh, it's a financial disaster, but one has to do something in this life.
As you'd expect, the silky Jaguar engine gives very smooth performance, and with the solid chassis, nice level ride and good road holding. It's beautifully trimmed in here, but you've got to say, very cramped. I can only just get my hand and forearm past the armrest and the edge of the steering wheel. And no matter how beautifully it's trimmed, it's not going to convince you if you can't live with the uncompromising styling.
For £67,000, there are many better cars on the market. I suppose the car it comes closest to in personality is the Bristol. And like the Bristol, the market for such cars is extremely limited. Only 5 of these Ace of Spades cars have been sold so far. But far from being discouraged, Mr. Price is investing in a new car. At the Park Sheet Metal Factory in Coventry, famous for building the old Daimler limos, plans are being readied for a new kind of leap.
This is a mock-up in full size of a limousine that we're intending to build. The principle is to test the interior space and to make sure that we can get in and out with our top hats on. It's not as heavy as it looks. We chose the round tube principle for simplicity of construction so that we didn't have to get involved in too much tooling. It's not often that one gets the chance to design a car from stem to stern, so that's obviously pleasing. Plus the Lea-Francis name, which we've been involved with for so long, maybe have a rebirth.
So, combination of engineering ability, faith in the name and, let's face it, sheer bloody-mindedness have conspired to ensure that the proud name Lea-Francis is on the radiator of a car right through into the next millennium. Amazing, isn't it?
Prepare to abandon conventional motoring wisdom. Everything the adverts say is rubbish. Forget your MPGs, your in-car accessories, your residual resale values, and your plastic wind deflectors. Forget them all, because at the heart of motoring, I reckon there's something much more significant. No, we're not talking about performance. We're talking about that magical and unmeasurable ingredient, image. With most motors, you know exactly what you're getting. Take this Goffey R6. It says the driver likes speed, but he's pretty cool about the whole thing. He's wedged up, but only discreetly flash. A bloke like this would never show off because, well, he's above all that.
Your car speaks volumes about you. And, like it or not, it has a big effect on how others perceive you. And, in turn, that affects the way that you feel about yourself. So surely it's unwise, dangerous even, to buck the system, to pour oil on these calm waters, to incite envy, even hatred, just for a laugh. I ask you, how can you sleep at night when you're a pretender?
Well, the owner of this car has no trouble sleeping at night. This is a JPR Wildcat. Ford Sierra suspension, Rover V8 engine, 9 months of hard graft and £10,000, and you could have a car that looks like one that would cost you twice as much. We tried to make its owner, Derek Argyle, feel guilty, but he says it's the best thrill he's ever had. A pair of Porsche RSKs would set you back a cool $500,000. But pals Peter Truelock and Roger England, who live in the same village, have a couple of GP Spider kit cars, and they only cost £6 grand each. Indistinguishable from the real thing, they'll claim 60 in 6 seconds, despite their humble Beetle background. This fake game sure looks like fun.
Love is reaching.
And if budget and fun are on opposing scales, then Alan Phipps's Bullet could be just the one for you. It could be an Aston Martin Vantage, the plaything of a millionaire. But underneath that svelte body lurks a Ford Capri. Alan spent £3 grand on a car that's easy to build, and he claims it's changed his life. It even gets him special treatment on the road.
It's such an eerie feeling.
But would he do it again? Does he like being a pretender? Was it worth it?
Yes.
All right, I admit, it looks like it could be fun. But of course, how much fun you're having depends on how much you can afford. It's all about cash. And for £10,000, you could have one of these. What it is a Pontiac Fiero with a mid-mounted 2.8-litre V6 engine. But with some bolt-on fins, an eyeball-popping paint job, and if you only have a look at it through the bottom of a beer glass, it's a Ferrari Testarossa. All right, so the real thing is about 2 yards wider. But hey, for 10 grand, you couldn't get the mud flaps on a genuine Testarossa. This very car was built for Sylvester Stallone's stunt double. A replica supercar for a replica superstar. Quite fitting, really. However, if you like your action heroes tall, dark and capable of joined-up writing, then how about a Ferrari 308, just like Magnum PI? This one boasts a leather-lined cabin, air conditioning and lots of those little details that make a Ferrari special. Apart from the motor, a distinctly unspecial 2.5 litre 4-cylinder engine, and they don't make those in Maranello.
Sometimes driving this car and using it can be a little bit of a nightmare. It's great driving down the street where no one can stop you and talk to you, but as soon as you stop, as soon as you get to that petrol station, people flock around and they're asking you about your Ferrari. How much is your Ferrari and how long you've had your Ferrari? And they say, oh, I like your Ferrari, mate, I like your Ferrari, you know, how much does it cost? And you have to tell them, no, it's not a Ferrari, it's a replica. So I put the little caps on the wheels and badges and spotlights and leather interior, a very serious sound system. I think it brightens people's lives up to see a nice car in a drab Tuesday morning. People are just totally gobsmacked and it gives you a thrill. Some people have mentioned, oh, you're just being a fake, you're just being a pose and all this. But at the end of the day, it's all good fun, it's not too expensive, and I really enjoy it. It's great. I wanted something that looked great. I drive an Escort up this road, nobody looks at me. I drive this, everybody looks, and that's what it's all about.
A real 308 will cost around 30 grand, and since Steve got his pretend one, he started building kits. But that's yesterday's news, because plans are now afoot for a more up-to-date shape, and this until now secret car will soon break cover. A projected on-the-road cost of £10,000 means lots of poles for very few pounds. Well, let's be honest, you don't want a replica, a weedy, snivelling copycat of a car. What you want is something with a motor that registers on the Richter scale, with more rubber than a fetishist Christmas party, and with looks that will burn a hole in the back of your brain. What you want is a car that looks an awful lot like this one. You're thinking that this is the time in the item when I start blathering on about how you can't beat the real thing. Well, no, because this snake is also a fake. All done and finished on the road, a Venom can be yours for around 20 grand, which is less than a third of the price of a Dodge Viper. Ah, you're saying, but the whole point of the Dodge Viper was brute horsepower, and an underpowered replica, well, it just can't cut it. Yes, except that this Venom has got 450 horsepower. So, you get the idea. If you're going to tell porcupines about the identity of your car, then make sure that your lie is an exceedingly large one.
Next week, Michelle and I are off to Switzerland for the weekend, for the Geneva Motor Show. Tiff's driving an Ascari. No, it's not Italian, it's made in Wiltshire. And Steve Berry finds a proper job at last, carrying parcels.